What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you about sleeping pads, and specifically budget sleeping pads, and I guess kind of the journey, if you will, that I took through the whole budget sleeping pad world to try to finally get to the pad that I currently use today. Now, when I first started backpacking, my camping experience was pretty much car camping. I had done a lot of car camping with my family and with my kids, both when they were in Cub Scouts and through their journey through Boy Scouts. So at that time, I had the typical car camping type equipment that you would expect. I had the huge Coleman inflatable mattresses, or I had a cot that I used. I used one of those two things primarily when I was camping to sleep on. Well, when we started transitioning into more backpacking style outings, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to take a cot or a big, huge Coleman inflatable mattress with me. So I started looking around for options for a lighter, more portable sleeping pad. Now, when I pick a sleeping pad, there's kind of just a few categories that I kind of use to judge them by. Number one is comfort. Number two is packability. And number three is warmth, or its ability to insulate you from the ground. Those are in no particular order. Those are just the things that I kind of look at. And for those of you who don't know, apart from comfort, one of the primary reasons for using a sleeping pad is to kind of insulate you from the ground. A lot of times, new campers or new backpackers kind of have the perception that they can just throw their sleeping bag on the ground and go to sleep in it, and the sleeping bag will keep them warm. Well, the truth is, it really won't. The ground, no matter what the temperature is outside, the ground is going to be cool. So even though it might be a really warm night, you might start off being completely warm. As the night progresses, you'll eventually start to become colder and colder. And what's happening is the ground is actually sucking the heat out of your body. Now, if it's a really warm night, it might not be enough to really make you too uncomfortable. But if it's a little bit of a cooler night, or sometimes overnight temperatures can drop, you'll start to become a little bit uncomfortable. And now you might think, well, I have my sleeping bag underneath me. Why isn't that keeping me insulated? Well, the problem is when you're laying on your sleeping bag, you're compressing the insulation in it. You're squeezing it down. And the way the insulation in a sleeping bag works, it works through loft. So it kind of traps air in there, and that's what keeps you warm. When you're squeezing it down, it loses its ability to insulate you from the ground. So that's why you need something underneath you to help insulate you and keep you warm as you're sleeping. So I knew that I needed something to sleep on, so I started looking around, and I noticed that a lot of the kids, a lot of the scouts, were using these blue foam mats that you can get at Walmart. And these are really cheap. These are, I don't know, I think at the time I bought it, it was like 10 bucks. I think they're probably about 15 bucks now, but really inexpensive. And, I'm kind of a budget-minded gear person. I do look for budget options. That's kind of my default. And I think having that practice or taking that approach got me into a little bit of trouble when it came to picking a sleeping pad. So I saw, like I said, I saw the kids were using these, and I thought, well, hey, that looks like that'll work. That'll insulate me from the ground. It's a closed cell foam pad. I'll go and purchase one of those. So I headed off to Walmart. I bought one of these. And this is what I used on my first one or two trips where we did backpacking style camping. And I got to tell you, this thing about killed me. This is not comfortable at all. It does insulate you from the ground to some extent, but the problem with it is that after you lay in it for more than just a few minutes, it really starts to hurt your back. And forget about side sleeping on it. You will dig into the ground and you'll be really uncomfortable. Now, it's really hard. They don't really advertise what the R value on this is, but doing some research I found that the R value is about like 1 or 1.3 on this thing. So, it's obviously much better than having nothing. And for, those summer nights that kind of get cooler, it will insulate you no problem and keep you warm. But you're going to be miserable on it. And, I have found that for whatever reason, kids can sleep on these and they don't seem to have too much trouble. They don't really complain about it. I don't know if that's because they are they weigh less, so it doesn't bother them as much. But I'm just going to say that if you're a full-size adult or an older person, don't be tempted by this because you will regret it. So once I decided that that wasn't going to work for me, I started looking for another option. I needed to have something that was going to be more comfortable. And again, I'm being budget-minded going through this process, so I started looking online and I came across these self-inflating sleeping mats. Thermarest makes these, but they are, they're pretty pricey. Anything with the Thermarest brand on it is usually pretty pricey. There's some other off brands out there, but I wasn't sure, if I could trust those or how good they were. And then I found on eBay that they sell U.S. military surplus sleeping mats. And from the research that I did, it seemed like, from what I could tell, these were actually made by Thermarest. So I thought, oh, well, that's a Thermarest mat, but it's used, it's military surplus, so I could get it pretty cheaply. I think they were selling these for about 20 bucks at the time. So I thought, okay, that'll be my solution. I'll go ahead and buy one of these $20 Army surplus mats. And so I did that. I ordered one, and it is a bit more comfortable than the blue mat. I will say that. But again, it's hard to find the R value on these. I don't think it's really published on this specific mat, but looking at similar mats that Thermarest makes and other companies like it, from what I can see, this thing is probably somewhere between an R2 and an R3. So from an insulation standpoint, it is much better than the blue mat, and it is more comfortable than a blue mat, but it is not that much more comfortable. So, sleeping on your back, it's better, but again, sleeping on your side, it really gets to be uncomfortable pretty quickly. The other thing with this, and also with the blue mat for that matter, is the packability is not that great on them. You can roll them up, but the problem is even the size rolled up, they're really not going to fit inside your backpack. So you're kind of relegated to carrying them on the outside of your backpack, strapping them on some way, which, I have done that, but I'm not a really big fan of that. I don't really like having things on the outside of my pack, especially really wide things that kind of stick off the side if I can avoid it. So the packability wasn't that great, and this thing is actually pretty heavy. This thing weighs about 2 pounds. So I used this for 1 or 2 trips, and like I said, it was an improvement, but I still wasn't really happy with it. I was thinking I need something that can pack up smaller and is still a little bit more comfortable. So that took me to the next purchase that I made. And that is this Outdoorsman Lab inflatable sleeping mat. Now this thing is actually really comfortable for a budget mat. This thing is about 40 bucks. The problem with it, though, is it has no insulation in it whatsoever, apart from the air that it's using to lift you up off the ground. But I was surprised at actually how comfortable this mat is. It does sleep really comfortable for a budget sleeping pad. And I did use this for a few trips, and I really did enjoy it, but they were summer trips. So I was able to get away with it not really being too warm, and I really did not have any problems with it. So, for summer trips, I think this is probably a good budget option. It does have a little bit of a weird inflation valve that you have to kind of get used to, but It's really not horrible, but I really did like this pad. The problem with it is I got to the point where I was going to be taking some trips that were going to be in cooler weather, and I knew that this was not going to insulate me. So this thing, I believe, is around a R1.3 or 1.4. So really, from an insulation standpoint, it's very similar to the blue pad. But that's really about it. And like I said earlier, that's not going to cut it when the nights start getting a little bit cooler. I would say if you're going to be down into the 60s at night, you'd be fine with this. So again, for 40 bucks, not a bad option. But when it got to the point, like I said, where I wanted to go on trips that were going to have cooler weather, I knew I needed to get something else. So it took me to the next purchase. Started looking online, and again, I'm looking for a budget solution here. I came across the Klymit Static-V Lite, and this is the insulated version. So these go for about 80 bucks. Now this was, quite a bit of a price jump from the previous options that I had purchased. But I was looking online, and you saw that this was an insulated pad, and I thought, well, maybe this will do the trick. And to be honest with you, I kind of feel like I got taken on this. And there's a whole lot of information online about this thing, and a lot of controversy about the rated R value for it. If you look back at the time I bought it on the Klymit website, they said that this was an R 4.4. And so I bought it based on believing that it was an R 4.4. Well, sometime after that, the industry developed a testing standard, an ASTM testing standard for sleeping pads. And when they put this pad to that test, it really did not hold up to that 4.4. And I think the problem with it is if you look at it here, you've got these V's here where the air inflate, and then you've got these sections in between them. And I think that, the parts of your body that are laying on these inflated sections do get pretty good insulation. Those are insulated. And that's probably the 4.4 part of it. The problem is these areas in here, these welds, there's no insulation in here. I mean, that goes straight through. All you've got is the 2 layers of material there. So there's really no insulation in these gaps whatsoever. And that's where the cold leaks through. Now, I know Klymit, if you look at their information on it, they say, well, your sleeping bag is going to fall down into these areas, and it won't be compressed because it's going to kind of fill up these gaps, and that will give you the extra insulation that you need. But I found in my experience it really just doesn't work that way at all. This thing, my wife and I both had these. We took them on a trip where it got down into the 40s, and we both got pretty cold on these things. So like I said, I think these gaps are really where it failed, and we were pretty uncomfortable down into the 40s. And if this were truly a 4.4, you would have no problem sleeping down into the 40s on a mat that's 4.4. So that tells me right then and there that that temperature rating is pretty suspect. So now I needed to come up with something better. So I thought, well, let me back up for a second. So at first I thought, well, I can still use this on the colder trips, but what I can do is I can take this blue mat with me too and put that underneath it. And I did try that. My wife took a car camping trip just to kind of test out that theory. And we took these and we put them underneath the static V's, and that did make up the difference. That did make it much warmer, and we were down into, I think, the high 30s that night. And with the combination, it was really warm. But the problem is when you go backpacking, I'm thinking, do I really want to carry 2 mats with me? Especially, like I said earlier, I really don't like carrying this on the outside of my pack to begin with. So now I'm going to be carrying a mat in my pack and one on the outside of my pack. And that's starting to add up with a lot of bulk and a lot of weight. So again, being budget minded, I'm trying not to spend any more money than I've already put into this process. So then I thought, well, what I could do is get a sheet of Reflectix and put Reflectix underneath it. So let me grab that real quick. This is Reflectix. So, I bought this at Home Depot. And again, this is kind of that bubble wrap insulation that's got the foil on both sides. And I thought, well, this will be lighter and it's a little smaller than the blue mat. So I wonder how this would work underneath it. So I tried it on one camping trip and I could definitely tell it helped. And it would probably be an option and it would definitely improve this pad. But then again, I'm thinking, this is almost just as bulky as the blue pad. It is lighter. But now, again, I'm stuck with, strapping something on the outside of my pack, which I really didn't want to do. So I finally came to the conclusion that I was going to have to spend more money on this than what I had done in the past. And I was watching some YouTube reviews. I was watching Justin Outdoors and Backcountry Exposure. And if you watch videos on YouTube for backpacking, you know that both of those guys are super experienced. And both of them reviewed this pad here. This is the REI Helix pad. And they both gave this thing glowing reviews. Now this was a lot more expensive than anything I had bought. But I watched for, REI has their sales. They've got, like a spring sale, a fall sale, and then they've got those 20% coupons that they put out from time to time. And I was kind of having my eye on this after, looking at their reviews. And it went on sale and I got it for, I think, like 120 bucks. And normally sells for 160 or something like that, but I got it for 120. And I got to tell you, this pad is phenomenal. I love this pad. So, it is heavier than my other two inflatable pads, and it is a little bit bigger. So from a packability standpoint, it does take a bit of a hit, but this thing is super warm. This is an R4.9, and I do believe that this thing does live up to that. It really is truly a 4.9 pad. We've taken it on a few cold weather outings or cooler weather outings and slept really warm. In fact, almost too warm sometimes for me. I'm a little bit of a warm sleeper, and this thing works really well. And from a comfort standpoint, it is really, really nice. And other people, like I said in those other videos, have vouched for that too. It's way more comfortable than the other inflatable pads that I've talked about here. And it has kind of these quilted baffling patterns. But the one thing that's kind of cool about it, and I know there's other pads that do this too, is these are offset. So the dimples on this side of the pad are behind these inflated parts and vice versa. So you don't have, like what I pointed out on the Static-V, you don't have welds where the cold air can escape through, because no matter where you have one of these dimples, you've got an insulated part of the pad on the other side of it. So this pad sleeps really warm. It's wider. This is the long, wide version. It's wider than the other pads, and believe me, that extra couple inches makes a huge difference for when it's comfortable. Now, this thing is a bit heavier than the other pads. This thing is about 26 ounces. So, I know a lot of people would consider that heavy compared to other pads that you can buy in the industry, but those other ones are a lot more expensive. So again, even though this is quite a bit more expensive, some people may or may not consider $120 a budget price point, but really for what you get, I do think it's worth the money if you can get it on sale, which, like I said, you can, a couple times throughout the year usually. And here's the kicker. If I add up everything I spent on all of those other pads, I could have just bought this from the outset. So I think this is a case where trying to be budget minded and looking for a budget piece of gear kind of came back to bit me, and I made a lot of mistakes. So if I had done more research back at the beginning and really understood these things a little bit better, I could have bought something like this in this price range and been a lot happier from the outset. So those are my takes on it, on these sleeping pads. If you've got any questions on any of them, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And hopefully this helps you out. Like I said, my advice would be, buy once, cry once, be done with it, and get something that you're going to be comfortable on, that's going to keep you warm, that you can fit inside your pack, and something you're going to be happy with, because there's nothing worse than being out in the backcountry and getting a really bad night's sleep. And especially on the blue pad and that military pad, I had some really bad nights of sleep, and I was miserable the next day. So on this thing, I sleep great. I sleep the same as I do at home. So again, I'll wrap it up here, but that's my advice. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, do all those YouTube things, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.